longer. We're joining you, Stephanie Waite and Brian Hampton, as your co-founders of ChangeNerd. It is 6:30 a.m. Central Time if you're joining us from that area in that region. And we are so excited for you to join us for a little bit of espresso to your ears. So before we get started with the topic, Brian, can you tell us just a little bit about ChangeNerd?
Yeah, so ChangeNerd is an online learning community for enterprise change makers. What that means, if you work in HR, IT, change management, project management, business transformation, you should be in the ChangeNerd community. We have weekly events. We also have 2 learning channels, the Future of Work and Global Work and Culture. And you can experience those events on a weekly basis. So jump into the ChangeNerd community.
Excellent. Thank you. So let's get into it because we only have a couple minutes together. We want to get these people off to work or wherever they're going. So essentially, when we think about toxic politics at work, I think everybody who's listening to this right now can raise their hand and are probably listening pretty intently. We've all dealt with it, right? Talk to us a little bit about why do we care about toxic politics?
I think it's an important conversation. You know, politics is something that we as adults, we just have to deal with it. We deal with it in society, and we'll have to deal with it within organizations, frankly, because there's always a lack of resources. So people are going to fight for status, people are going to fight for power, and then oftentimes the environment just becomes toxic. So I think that's why this is so important.
Yeah. So let's talk about a couple of key techniques, right? We know too with toxic politics that you have mentioned, and we talk about this a lot, people have secret meetings, like the meeting before the meeting. You know, they may have a boss or somebody that they work with on their team that, you know, there's some issues that are going on or something happens that create this toxic sort of assumptive environment, right?
Yeah.
And then there are barriers, there are processes, there are things that create, an inability to get to where you're going or to drive for success. So tell us, what's one technique, what's one key thing that we can start doing today that will help us overcome these toxic politics at work?
There's a lot of times when we enter an organization and we're experiencing toxic, org politics, a lot of people tend to follow the behaviors that's happening around them. So when you see people kind of, building their own empire and doing things of that nature, automatically you'll have a large group of people who will follow that behavior, right? That will automatically become part of their leadership because they see others doing it and they think, okay, I need to behave like that in order to get promoted.
Yep.
When you'll never eliminate organizational politics, but there's power. And you talk about this, there's power in knowing who you are and what you value and doing the best that you can to be transparent about your agenda, right? So organizational politics really thrives off of secrecy. And so as a professional, if you're more aware around your agenda, right, and being more transparent, like sharing it, like when you're in meetings and things of that nature, if there's a certain perspective or something that you want to push forward, just being open and saying, listen, I'm really passionate about this and here's why, right? Just being transparent and letting those around you who believe what you believe jump on board versus having the meeting before the meeting to make sure that you have people who align with you, right? Like that's being secretive and kind of, and you're feeding into that toxic politics type of environment. So role modeling the right behaviors, being transparent and sharing your agenda. That's one side. The other side is knowing who you are as a person and establishing values. Because again, with the role modeling piece, it's almost contagious, right?
Sure.
Everybody else, if everybody else is playing these secrecy games and all this other stuff, but you're the person who's standing upright and role modeling good behaviors, you're going to stand out. And at the end of the day, your behavior is going to become contagious, and then slowly but surely you'll start changing the culture within your team and those around you. What are some tips that you would recommend?
Yeah, so I think my number one, really, so that we'll give you 2 tips today, is really building and diversifying your identity. So Brad Karcher actually out of Vizier just sent us an article for ChangeNerd and said, hey, I think this would be great for your podcast or your ChangeNerd show, which was fascinating because we're talking about toxic politics. And the title of the article was how to stop worrying about what other people think.
Yeah.
And that really gets into this idea of FOPO, which is fear of other people's opinions, right? So if you want to check that out, you can look at it at HBR review or hbr.com. So what they talk about and what I always talk about is how do you really make sure that your identity is not 100% wrapped up at work? Because if some little blip on the radar occurs, something happens, your job's at risk, something goes down, you don't feel your best one day, you bomb a meeting, and you create a little bit of negative self-doubt, you have the identity, or you're building your identity in other areas as well, that will give you the increased confidence to really say, you know what, let me stand on my strength and let me really understand why I'm caring about other people's opinions, or how can I do that differently the next time. So I would say one key technique and one thing you can start doing now is, what are you really good at? What are people telling you you're really good at? And start writing those things down. In addition, it's, when I'm at my best, what are you doing? Where are you?
Yeah.
Who are you describing yourself as? How are you doing that? And really creating, the most productive and most flourishing environment for yourself, and try to create that environment every single day and gather data on yourself. And you mentioned this earlier. Part of this idea around diversifying and building your identity is also knowing your value sets. I talk about this with anybody, especially anybody who's dealing with toxic, politics at work, anyone who's going through a career transition. You and I talk about this all the time of how do we make decisions.
Yep.
It's all through our value sets. And that's why at ChangeNerd, you and I have crafted our own value sets, because all of our decisions go through that. So it's building our identity, building our confidence around our brand, and other people know how to fit into who we are. That also goes for when you're dealing with toxic politics at work. When people know who you are and you're showing up consistently, sometimes when you're not showing up consistently, that's when people know something's off. So you're able to then tap into that and say, how can I get back on my brand? How can I get back to myself? And make sure that at night you can lay your head down and you fall asleep perfectly, that you didn't engage in that toxic politics at work as well.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Stephanie, you said a mouthful. That was awesome.
So do you.
That was awesome.